And people who say that being in a job makes you happy, that is real rubbish. A job is not something there to make you happy. A job is fundamentally a functional, instrumental issue. I go to a job because I need the money. I go to a job because that's the way I have to do it. But most people are doing things they would love not to be doing. Being in a job actually reduces the capacity for millions of people to develop their humanity. Whether you restrict it to 4 days a week, or 5 days a week, or 7 days a week, it's still being in a job and thinking that that is the most important thing in your life. It isn't.
Back to our hunter-gatherer past, you will find that we worked 2 hours, 3 hours a day, and it wasn't even work. We did things which kept us alive for 2 or 3 hours a day, but those things were part of our cultural life. We probably loved them. We probably really enjoyed hunting and gathering. I mean, after all, that's what people do when they have free time and money. You know, the rich people go hunting and gathering.
We look at people who have broken out of the cycle of being so embedded in work. It's been a crisis in their own life that's brought that about, perhaps through a bereavement of somebody who died young, and they made them really evaluate what were they doing. Was this what they really wanted to do, to be so involved in work for the rest of their life? Instead of that being one or two people thinking about crisis and staring at it in that way, everybody's looking at that now, thinking there are other opportunities, rather than all getting in our cars or getting on the underground and going into work every day. There's lots of other ways we can live our lives, and that's become clear to everybody.
We're not enhancing life, but suppressing the people we wanted to be.
For the sake of income, a job that might be alienating, tiring. Then we come home, we have no energy left. There's still chores to do, children to feed and put to bed, groceries to buy. And so work has this kind of colonizing effect on our free time. Work. But this isn't just a kind of cultural problem or a kind of work obsession or ideological brainwashing so that people are obsessed with work. This is really an economic problem. People overwork because they have to make ends meet. The Uber driver who drives around 7 days a week doesn't do it because he's being kind of culturally brainwashed into working hard, but because he has to do that.
It's not just our employers that treat us as only having utility value, but we look at ourselves that way. And without getting too spiritual on you, I think we've got to accept that, we have intrinsic value. You have to earn your keep in order to stay alive, but you don't have to earn your keep in order to be worth something. You come in as a valuable, dignified, conscious human with a soul, and if you can accept that, then everything changes.
Where we find ourselves right now is we have climate breakdown, we have automation, and we have an aging society. We are being forced to rethink our whole value system.
For 150 years, economists have been dreaming of this vision of how we will become so productive eventually that we'll only need to work 10, 15 hours a week in order to acquire the things that we need to live well. And that vision has never come true.
The interesting thing is that as we've transitioned to a digital age, we're still using that extractive, controlling, industrial age model. And so people said that digital would disrupt capitalism or disrupt business, and they're acting like it's some kind of revolution, but it's not. It's an extremely reactionary movement where we're using digital technology to reinforce the same kind of extractive, automating biases of industrialism, only we're doing it on digital steroids.
The state and businesses are working together quite closely to ensure that the economy is profitable for the people who own the stuff, the people who own the capital. And doing that requires having a large, powerless workforce that is unable to refuse the option of working. If you are perceived to not be working hard enough to get a job, you are part of the undeserving poor, you're lazy, and therefore you don't deserve access to the state's resources. And that's obviously something that you see going back, several hundred years, where you had the poor houses and the people that were seen as kind of too lazy to work and forced to take horrible labour in really horrific conditions.
And so we see these news stories come out pretty much on a monthly basis in the media. And they say things like, what are we going to do with ourselves in this future where robots have taken the jobs and we don't have to work anymore? And I see these stories and I think, well, we should be so lucky, because the official purpose of automation isn't really to give us more free time. The official purpose of automation is to make production more efficient, so that businesses can extract a greater profit. Businesses benefit from the replacement of human workers by machines because they don't need breaks, they don't unionize. So the reason we haven't seen automation produce a radical reduction in working hours is quite simply because this is not the official purpose of automation.
I want to see the destruction of boring labour. But what the automation and the technological changes have been doing have been increasing inequalities.
We're using digital technology to reinforce the same extractive, automating biases of industrialism, only we're doing it on digital steroids.
Entire integrity of the living planet that gives us life, that enables us to survive. And so something that begins merely as a project to sell more stuff ends as a project to destroy humanity and the other species with which we share the planet.
As it kind of takes away that economic whip that's behind us when we make choices about where to work, how much to work, and so on. We might make those choices in a more autonomous and thoughtful way with the backing of economic security. Time to think is probably one of the most essential ingredients of freedom. If we see free time in this way, then we might see it as an issue of distributive justice in the same way we see money as an issue of distributive justice. Maybe governments should be thinking about introducing policies to make sure everybody gets their fair share. Time to think is one of the real casualties of today's kind of long hours culture. And I think time to think is really essential for freedom, to think about the roles that you're in, the habits that you have, the priorities that you have. Are they really your priorities? Did you inherit them from somewhere? Without time to think, we have no time to reflect on these things.
Those are the sorts of things that will make people be able to live a life with security and not be forced to work as many hours as they do right now. Got here? One big factor that we don't talk enough about are some of the economic instruments and measures by which we measure how well we're doing as a society. And one of those, of course, is gross domestic product, or GDP, which is just a sense of adding up everything we've produced. And that may be arms, for instance. It also includes all of the major ways in which we pollute the environment. It is not a measure of success. It's not a measure of well-being of society. It's not a measure of happiness. It's not a measure of health of society, of child poverty. In fact, it takes all of those things out of the equation and makes it even worse because it treats people like robots. Produce, produce, produce. So when we have an aging society and we need to look after people, what does productivity look like? What, seeing more old people per day? Spending less time with each of those people? It completely dehumanizes our economy. We're driven right now by a target that makes us all feel sick.
The easiest way to get off that treadmill is to try not to strive for anything. Most of the things you do, try to do them for their own sake rather than for something else, or you're doing that for something else, because you'll never get there. There is no place to get. The sooner you go, okay, I'm alive right now.
We've forgotten this in the last 40 years, that we are actually ultimately social animals. We feel better when we're together, when we know each other, when we know our neighbours. And that is the world we should be aiming for. The only way we can do that is to create more time for us to come together and more space, more communal and public assets that we can use together so we can make that human connection.